Welcome to 4.5 part 3. It's going to be pretty quick. 4 examples. I only have 2 homework problems or whatever. Basically, we're going backwards here. We're writing factors from solutions and then kind of putting that. So if you think about it, we did all this work in the previous videos to get down to x equals this, and x equals this. Well, we are legitimately going backwards. So they're telling us, so here in example number 1, these are the 3 solutions. So my first thing was, let's write it like that. And then I said, well, how did we get here? What was the last thing we saw right before we got x equals 2? And they were like, well, it said equals 0 instead of equals 2. And I said, that's exactly right. So how do I get this to equal 0? Well, we subtract 2 to the other side. We subtract 5, subtract 6. And I said, we were looking at something like this because we went from here to here, my answer. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I said, do you remember what happened right before this? And so that's where we factored everything. And so, yeah, we factored and we got boom, boom, boom. And then we took these 3 and equaled 0. And then, right. So the opposite of factoring is foiling / distributing. It's crazy distributing, but it's distributing. And so all we got to do is take these 3 and FOIL them all together. And this was one of the last things we learned earlier in chapter 4, like right before the semester break. Basically, start with these 2, FOIL, so we get this here in green, and then we'll just FOIL in the last one. And you could do it with the rainbow method. It gets kind of sloppy. I don't like it. I like this box method a lot better. All my, go back to factor and FOIL, like the very beginning of this playlist, to see how this box method works. But this is just foiling. Those combine, or they combine over here in my final answer. A lot of teachers may have you stop here, but really, I think they need it to be all the way done. So this one, we have 4 answers, so here they are. -1 becomes plus, 3 becomes minus, -5 becomes plus, x equals 0. Okay, so x plus 1, x minus 3, and x plus 5, that's pretty simple. But this x minus 0 always came about when we had a greatest common factor that we pulled out. 2x equals 0, 9x squared equals 0. That was always x equals 0. So that is our greatest common factor that we, after, it's going to be the last thing we add in. But after we had all this, we pulled out first and then started factoring. The same thing, FOIL these together, FOIL that one into it, and then your greatest common factor just really needs to distribute back in, and all of your exponents go up by 1. X cubed becomes x to the 4th. Squared becomes cubed, 1 becomes 2, 0 becomes 1. Because if you look here in red, and I said, let's start factoring this, hopefully initially you go, well, they all have an x, so let's pull out an x. That's the greatest common factor. That's your x equals 0. Had my kids sketch this, and I said, how do we know what the solutions are? I'm like, well, it's where it crosses the x-axis. Boom, boom, boom. So x is -2, x is 1, and x is 3. And I asked them, do I need to keep going? Because now we're back at like what we did at number 1. They're like, no, we know, just make that x plus 2 and x minus 1 and x minus 3, and then start foiling. I was like, that's perfect. This one was a little bit different. 0.5. We don't really ever mess with decimals when we do factoring. We do have some fractions, so let's go from decimal to fraction. Took care of these already. We can say x minus 1/2 equals 0, but we never saw it like that because this little guy down here was usually sitting in front, just like this. Because if you think about it, if I add 1 and then divide by 2, I get to x equals 1/2. That's how we normally see it. So then we put all those together, and I didn't finish this one either because they were like, no, we're just foiling, aren't we? And I was like, yeah, it's pretty easy. If you need foiling practice, like literally the first, 3 or 4 videos of this playlist, really break it down and really talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, I only had a couple homework problems to give them, so hopefully this wasn't too terribly bad.